The Assembly is now in session. Assemblymember Bro notices the absence of a quorum. The Sergeants-at-Arms will prepare the chamber and bring in the absent members, and the clerk will call the roll.
Ashajian, Alejo, Allen, Baker, Bigelow, Bloom, Bonilla, Bonta, Bro, Brown, Burke, Calderon, Campos, Chang, Chow, Chavez, David Chu, Kansan Chu, Cooley, Cooper, DeBobne, Daly, Daly, Dodd, Eggman, Frazier, Gaines, Gallagher, Christina Garcia, Eduardo Garcia, Gatto, Gibson, Gomez, Gonzalez, Gordon, Gray, Grove, Hadley, Harper, Hernandez, Holden, Irwin, Jones, Jones Sawyer, Kim, Lackey, Levine, Linder, Lopez, Lowe, Mainshine, Mathis, Mays, McCarty, Medina, Melendez, Mullen, Nazarian, Obernolte, O'Donnell, Olson, Patterson, Perea, Quirk, Rendon, Ridley Thomas, Rodriguez, Salas, Santiago, Steinorth, Stone, Thurman, Ting, Wagner, Waldron, Weber, Wilk, Williams, Wood. Madam Speaker.
We have a quorum at this time. I'd like to ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. Today's prayer will be offered by our guest chaplain, Assemblymember Ridley Thomas.
Shall we pray? Lord, teach us to be generous. Teach us to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and not to ask for reward, but only to know your will and to do it with all our heart. Amen.
We ask our guests and visitors to please remain standing for the flag salute. Please join Assemblymember Frazier as he leads us in the pledge. Assemblymember Frazier.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me with the pledge to our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Wednesday, June 24th, 2015. The Assembly met at 7 a.m. Honorable Catherine B. Baker.
Mr. Holden moves and Ms. Waldron seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentation of petitions. There are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor. There are none. Messages from the Senate. There are none. Moving to motions and resolutions. Absences. For personal business, the absences of the day are Assemblymember Brown and Assemblymember Jones Sawyer. Moving now to procedural motions. Mr. Holden, you're recognized for your motions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 118 and allow Assemblymember Patterson to have guests and photographers on the floor today. Mr. Patterson's guest will be seated at his desk for introduction.
Without objection, that request is granted.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 and allow Assembly members Bloom and Nazarian to speak and adjourn in memories today.
Without objection, that request is granted.
Pursuant to Assembly Rule 96, I request unanimous consent to re-refer the following bills to committee. Senate Bill 204 Pavley from the Natural Resources Committee to the Appropriations Committee. Senate Bill 438 Hill from the Transportation Committee to the Rules Committee. Senate Bill 539 Glazier from the Utilities and Commerce Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection, such shall be the order.
On behalf of the author, I request unanimous consent to have the Chief Clerk request that the Governor return Assembly Bill 346 Wilk to the Assembly and that the action be rescinded whereby the bill was reported correctly enrolled and presented to the Governor on June 26, 2015.
Without objection, that request is granted.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 711, Woke, is at the Assembly desk. On behalf of the author, I request unanimous consent to rescind the action whereby Senate Bill 711 was passed to the Senate on June 22, 2015, and to place the bill on the third reading file.
Without objection, such shall be the order.
At the request of the author, please remove file item 51, Senate Bill 404, De Leon, from the consent calendar.
The clerk will note.
And at the request of the author, please remove file item 46, SJR 4, Lara, to the inactive file.
And the clerk will note.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. At this time, we're going to move to guest introductions. We have two guest introductions today. I'd like to first recognize Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's my privilege this morning to introduce for her first visit to Sacramento, my niece, Jordan Ninmer, who's up in the gallery. Wave, Jordan Ninmer. Thank you all very much.
And for our second guest introduction, I'd like to recognize Mr. Patterson.
Speaker and members, it is a real delight for Sharon and I to welcome to Sacramento and to introduce to you two of our three grandchildren. Joining us is Noah James and Jenna Bryn Patterson.
Thank you for welcoming our guests. With that, at this time, let's move on to business on the daily file. The second reading, the clerk will read.
Senate Bill 212 with amendments, 676 with amendments, 411, 244, 193, 9 with amendments, 296 with amendments, 225 with amendments, 415, 366, 415 with amendments, 792 with amendments, and 770.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. If we can now go to our concurrence in Senate amendments, let's go to file item 14, AB 467. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 467 by Assemblymember Chang, an act relating to explosives.
Assemblymember Chang, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 467 is back on concurrence. Amendments in the Senate were minor and technical. Current California law governing model rockets is outdated and doesn't reflect the advanced technology of modern rocketry. By updating California's model rocket laws, we are ensuring that it remains a STEM education platform for countless students across the state. Thank you, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Cork, you're recognized.
As a rocket engineer, I heartily support this bill, which will allow our school children to compete on an equal basis in national competitions. I urge a unanimous vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 64, noes 0. The Senate amendments are concurred in. Moving now to file item 15, AB 658. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 658 by Assemblymember Wilk, an act relating to health care.
Mr. Wilk, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 658 is back for technical non-substantive changes. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 66, no 0. Those Senate amendments are concurred in. Moving now to file item 16, AB 1308. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1308 by Assemblymember Perea and others, an act relating to employment.
Mr. Perea, you may open.
Mr. Speaker and members, AB 1308 is back for concurrence. Amendments in the Senate simply added co-authors. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 46, no 16. The Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 17, AB 301. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 301 by Assemblymember Bigelow and others, an act relating to fire prevention.
Mr. Bigelow, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 301 is back from the Senate for concurrence on amendments. Respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 69, no 0. The Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 18, AB 987. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 987 by Assemblymember Levine and others, an act relating to employment.
No, we already told us to pass and retain.
We're going to pass and retain on this item until Assemblymember Levine comes to the chamber. Let's go to file item 19, AB 991. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 991 by the Committee on Public Employees, Retirement, and Social Security, and act relating to state teachers' retirement.
This item will be presented by Mr. Bonta. Mr. Bonta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 991 is the annual CalSTRS Technical Housekeeping Bill, which makes various conforming and compliance amendments necessary for continued effective administration of CalSTRS. The Senate amendments made additional technical and non-controversial changes to the bill. The bill has enjoyed broad bipartisan support throughout the process. I respectfully ask for your concurrence.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 68, no 0. The Senate amendments are concurred in. Going now to file item 20, AB 1253. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1253 by Assemblymember Steinorth, an act relating to optometry.
Mr. Steinorth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, AB 1253 is back for concurrence from the Senate with technical and clarifying nature. It received unanimous bipartisan support. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 71, no 0. The Senate amendments are concurred in. We're going to go back to file item 18, AB 987. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 987 by Assemblymember Levine and others, an act relating to employment.
Assemblymember Levine, you're
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 987 is back from the Senate on concurrence. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 69, no 0. The Senate amendments are concurred in. Going to third reading, we're going to pass and retain file items 22 and 23 and move to file item 24, H.R. 9. The clerk will read.
House Resolution 9 by Assemblymember Irwin, relative to the 4th of July.
Assemblymember Irwin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. 239 years ago, on this day, July 2nd, John Adams wrote a letter to his wife Abigail saying, "The second day of July, 1776, will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America." Now, Adams was 2 days early with his prediction. It was on July 4th, 1776, that the Declaration of Independence was signed and adopted by the Continental Congress. On this day of celebration and remembrance, I ask that we all take a moment to remember the many people who have made these celebrations possible for all of us. Our nation's founders put their lives on the line to conduct an unprecedented and radical experiment in democracy. They dared to declare independence. They dared to declare the radical notion that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today we express gratitude to our founding fathers and to our men and women in the armed forces who fought to protect and uphold the ideals of freedom and equality for which the United States stands. I ask that the first roll be open for co-authors.
Assemblymember Irwin has asked the first roll to be open for co-authors. The clerk will open the roll. Members, this is for co-authors. The clerk will close the roll. 72 co-authors are added, and without objection, we will take a voice vote on the measure. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. File items 25 and 26 will pass and retain. Moving to file item 27, AJR 18, the clerk will read.
Assembly Joint Resolution 18 by Assemblymember Patterson and others, relative to the Federal Wildlife Disaster Funding Act.
Mr. Patterson, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, on behalf of myself and joint author, Assemblyman Gatto, I ask for your support of Assembly Joint Resolution 18 today. This AJR urges the California Congressional Delegation to support the Wildfire Disaster Funding Act. It is a bipartisan legislation that will establish much-needed funding reform to end the federal government's current practice of robbing the wildfire prevention accounts to pay for wildfire suppression. With the passage of this legislation, the U.S. Forest and Department of the Interior will have stable funding for land management and fire prevention to ensure that more than 20 million acres of overgrown national forest land in California will present less of a fire risk to our state and residents. This bill passed out of Assembly Natural Resources Committee unanimously. I ask that the first roll be open for co-authors and respectfully ask an aye vote.
Mr. Patterson has asked the first roll to be open for co-authors. The clerk will open the roll. Members, this is for co-authors. The clerk will close the roll. 72 co-authors are added, and this measure requires a roll call vote. The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Aye 73, no 0. The measure passes. Going now to file item 28, ACR 22. The clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 22 by Assemblymember Daly and others, relative to the Sierra Nevada Watershed Protection Week.
Mr. Daly, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to present ACR 22, which will establish the third week of September as Sierra Nevada Watershed Protection Week. The Sierra Nevada region California is critical to the overall vitality of the California variety for a variety of reasons. Here are just a few of them. The region is the origin of 60% of California's developed water supply. These watersheds are the primary source of fresh water flowing into the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, California's water hub. The forests of the Sierra Nevada store massive amounts of carbon, assisting the state in its efforts to combat climate change. The forest and watersheds provide critical habitat to hundreds of species. The region is a major producer of wood products and hydroelectric power. The area provides world-class recreation and opportunities enjoyed by millions around the world. There is a growing consensus that more must be done to increase the pace and scale of forest restoration in the Sierra Nevada. but a number of policy-related barriers need to be addressed in order to restore our forest and watersheds to a healthier state. I ask all of you to join me in establishing Sierra Nevada Watershed Protection Week, which will elevate the awareness and needs facing California's source watersheds and inspire the Californians to get out there and do their part to protect this critical resource. I ask the roll to be open for co-authors, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Daly has asked the first roll to be open for co-authors. The clerk will open the roll. Members, this is for co-authors. The clerk will close the roll. 75 co-authors are added. And without objection, we'll take a voice vote on this measure. All those in favor, please say aye. All opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. File items 29 and 30, as well as 31 and 32, we will pass and retain. Going now to file item 33 for purposes of amendments, SB 176. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 176 with amendments by Assemblymember Lackey.
This measure is measured by Senator Mitchell, which will be presented by Mr. Lackey.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, members, I present at this time Senate Bill 176 on behalf of Senator Mitchell for technical amendments, and simply ask for co-authors and respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no debate, we can take a voice vote on these amendments. All those in favor, please say aye. All opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The bill is out to print and back on file. File items 34 through 38 will pass and retain. Going now to file item 39, SJR 1. The clerk will read.
Senate Joint Resolution 1 by Senator Bell and others relative to Social Security.
Mr. O'Donnell, you may open.
Mr. Speaker and members, today I rise to present Senate Joint Resolution 1 by Senator Bell, which urges the United States Congress to pass legislation repealing the Social Security Act's windfall elimination provision and government pension offset. In California, these provisions penalize individuals who began their careers in the private sector and then switched to the public sector. When individuals decide to switch careers to become teachers or public safety officers, it reduces their benefits because the state or local government employer is not coordinated with Social Security. It is crucial for the United States government to take action in removing these penalties to ensure our teachers and other public employees are treated fairly under the Social Security system. They, too, should be able to access the benefits of a system they, too, have paid into. This resolution has bipartisan support, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
At this time, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 65, noes 8. The resolution is adopted. File items 40 through 49 we will pass and retain, and that concludes today's business on the daily file. Actually, at this time, we're going to go to the consent calendar. Does any member wish to remove an item from the consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, the clerk will read the second-day consent calendar.
Senate Bill 335 by Senator Roth, an act relating to earthquake insurance.
The clerk will open the roll on the consent calendar. All those vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 77, no 0. The consent calendar is adopted. The clerk will read the remaining bills on the second-day consent calendar.
Senate Bill 426.
Ayes 77, no 0.
And Senate Concurrent Resolution 58.
Ayes 77, no 0. This concludes the business on the daily file. We'll now move to adjournments in memory. The following members were granted prior permission to speak on an adjournment in memory. I'd like to recognize colleagues, if I could ask everyone if you could please keep your conversations to a minimum and be seated at your desks. I'd like to recognize Mr. Bloom for his adjourn in memory.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in memory of Kirk Kerkorian, a legendary investor and innovator who died in his home in Beverly Hills at the age of 98. Kerkorian is best known for his role in shaking up the casino, auto, and movie industries. He made a name for himself moving fluidly through all of these industries, buying, selling, and then buying again. In fact, he bought MGM Studios 3 times during his lifetime. But Krikorian grew up largely in poverty, and his family moved often, and he dropped out of school in the 8th grade, a fact that always bothered him. In his early life, he was an amateur boxer and a flight instructor. His first big deal in 1962 involved 84 acres of land that became the home of Caesar's Palace. In 1969, he built the International Hotel, which was built at the time as the largest resort hotel in the world. The first MGM Grand, which he built 4 years later, was 20% bigger than that. He was known for his support of the domestic automotive world and believed that the industry could become more competitive and profitable, so he invested in Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors. He was primarily a major behind-the-scenes player in business, but he was also quiet about his philanthropy, and he started the Lindsay Foundation, named for his daughters, which has given over $1 billion to various causes. Friends also remember as the kind of person who would leave a $100 tip for a $10 meal. In his free time, Krikorian enjoyed playing tennis and watching movies with friends, and he is survived by his daughters, Tracy and Linda, and his 3 grandchildren, and I ask that we adjourn in his memory.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. I'd also like to recognize Mr. Nazarian.
Thank you, colleagues and Mr. Speaker. It's also with sadness that I rise to adjourn in memory of Mr. Kirk Krikorian, who passed away earlier this month at the age of 98 years. Kirk was born to Armenian immigrants on June 6, 1917, in Fresno, California. At an early age, Krikorian dropped out, as my colleague eloquently spoke about his background, and pursued a boxing career. He was known as Rifle Right Krikorian, winning him the Pacific Amateur Welterweight Championship. As a young man during World War II, Krikorian flew daredevil missions across the Atlantic for $1,000 a trip, delivering mosquito bombers from Labrador to Scotland on what many people called suicide trips. With an average of only 1 in 4 planes making it, he defied the odds and took the gamble, making 33 such trips, which then became his investment for his future business. The money he earned enabled him to buy a single-jet airplane on his first trip to Vegas in 1945, eventually allowing him to start a charter business, which he later would sell for $100 million and give him his start in creating an empire. Money magazine recently called Kirk probably the most interesting man, the actual most interesting man, just because of the many lives he lived. And I had a brief opportunity to meet him in 1998 on the anniversary of the 100th airlift mission of supplies and necessary medical needs to Armenia after the devastating earthquake in Armenia in 1988. He had taken it upon himself to try to rebuild the fledgling nation and put some of his investments to work into infrastructure and medical aid. And so he was an amazingly humble man, someone who shied away from the camera and from press at all times, and just did what he felt in his way was a public good, and he will be sorely missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, please bring the names to the desk to be printed in the journal. All requests to adjourn in memory will be deemed read and printed in the journal. Moving now to announcements, I have a couple of announcements. I have been told that tomorrow one of our colleagues will be celebrating a birthday, I think his 30th birthday. I want to congratulate our Rules Committee Chair, Mr. Gordon. Happy birthday. And with that, the scheduled session is as follows. Friday, July the 3rd, no check-in session, no floor session. Colleagues, I want to wish all of you a very happy Independence Day on July the 4th, and we'll see you back on Monday, July the 6th for floor session at 9 a.m. All other items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions continued. Seeing and hearing no further business, I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Holden moves, and Ms. Waldron seconds that this House stands adjourned until Monday, July the 6th at noon. On Monday, July the 6th, floor session will begin at noon. At this time, quorum call is lifted.